Hello and welcome back. In my last video I painted 3000 points of Iron Hands. Whilst I was getting the room set up to create more videos, I realised I had a load of Skaven lying around. I already had some assembled bits from when I convinced myself I'd play loads of Warcry, but to be honest, I don't think they ever made it onto the table. My name is Ollie, you've tuned into Void Space Alpha, and today we're going to be speed building and speed painting over 2000 points of Skaven. I'm not going to show you the total assembly because it's pretty straightforward, but I did want to make a couple of things clear before we dive in. I've left the crew off of the siege engines where I felt it was too fiddly to paint them on. Also, it's worth noting that the plague monks have the biggest mould lines I've ever seen. I spent a while scraping it off, but it's still pretty pronounced. You may want to skip plague monks for your army when you're building your force. To make painting as easy as possible, I try and get as much work done in each step as I can. To that end, I like to prime my models with either the colour that is going to be the most difficult to paint, or the colour that is going to do the most work on the model. So I'll be priming 40 clan rats, 10 storm vermin, and all the characters and artillery crew with the army painter leather brown spray. I'll be priming the 19 plague monks with Halfords matte white. I'll prime the artillery pieces with Halfords grey, and finally the 3 storm fiends with army painter Barbarian flesh. Now I have a desk full of coloured minis and I can start my batch painting. Starting with the clan rats seems like the most sensible place to begin for me. There's 40 of them, which is over 50% of our army. We'll get loads of practice for the cooler and character models later on, and I also think I can bat these out very quickly with a handful of paints. To follow what I'm doing, you will need Bugmans Glow, Leadbelcher, Phonecian Purple, but feel free to swap out your own clan colour if you want to, Runelord Brass, Rakarth Flesh, Mephiston Red, and Agrax Earthshade. Start by picking out all the areas you want to be rat skin with Bugman's Glow. Leave the little fur tufts brown and feather the flesh up to them. You can be as quick and messy with this as you like, as everything else will be painted over. Just be careful around the shaft of the spear and the body furs. With all the skin done, grab your Leadbelcher and block in all the metallic areas. On clan rats, this is the weapon blades, armour panels, the odd helmet and collars. Be sure to base any areas silver that you plan on painting gold later. Gold over silver really pops. Onto the Phonecian Purple, and it's a really easy step, but it's a little bit time consuming due to the accuracy needed. Just carefully block in any clothing areas on the minis. This is the only step that may require 2 coats. Thin your paints down with a bit of water, take your time to be accurate, and it'll be over before you know it. Very quickly grab your Runelord Brass and touch in any areas you want gold. On this miniature I am doing the front of the shield. Move straight onto your Rakarth Flesh, touch in the teeth, the toenails, any cloth wraps like around the waist, ankles and wrists, and any claws. Drop a careful dot of Mephiston Red into each of the eye sockets, then give the entire model a wash of Agrax Earthshade, let it dry fully, and our rat boy,
and who could forget dear rat boy,
is ready for basing. Now we're going to do a quick and easy basing scheme that will give your Skaven that bursting into a street near you feel. Give the base a total covering of Citadel's Astrogranite texture paint. Once that's dry, just give the base a wash all over of Drakenhoff Nightshade. Again, once that's dry, give it a dry brush of Longbeard Grey. Finally, and this is optional, grab some Citadel Valhallan Blizzard and create some clumps of snow on the base. Do these steps with all of the clan rats you've painted so far, wait for it all to dry, give it a couple of coats of matte varnish and you'll have the beginnings of a cool looking army. As I hadn't glued any of the big pieces to their bases yet, I did those too. After you've finished all of your clan rats, you're going to move on to your storm vermin, and there's going to be a couple of changes in this paint scheme, so pay attention. But we're going to start off with Bugman's Glow again, and we're going to touch in the skin areas exactly the same as we did on the clan rats. And once you've done the skin stage on your storm vermin, we're going to switch to Phonecian Purple. Again, switch to your own preferred clan colour if you'd like. And we're going to touch in all the areas that are clothing. And once that's done, you'll have a model that looks roughly like this, and that's where the first change comes in. We're going to grab our Runefang steel, and we're going to use this instead of Leadbelcher on the storm vermin to touch in all of the armour plates, the headdress, the chainmail and the weapons. And here you can see that step completed. A lot of colours are starting to appear on the model now, and it will look really shiny, so don't panic. The next stage is we're going to use our Runelord Brass, and we're going to use that just to touch in any of the details that we want to look a little bit embellished. So I'm going to go for the crest of their headdress here and the hilt of his dagger. Once that's complete, let everything dry fully. If you're doing these conveyor belt method, they should all be dry fully. and we're going to give the model an all-over wash of Agrax Earthshade, base them exactly the same as we did all the other models so far, and you'll end up with something that's starting to look like an army. Moving on to the big infantry models now, the Storm Fiends. You'll remember we gave them a prime of Army Painter's Barbarian flesh, and we're also going to now touch in all of the clothing with, surprise surprise, Phonecian purple. The only difference here that you'll probably find is that it only requires one coat of thinned down Phonecian purple because it's going over a lighter base coat. But if you need to, just thin it down so you don't obscure any details, and once you're done, you'll have something that looks a bit like this. The next colour we'll need is Gorthor Brown, and we're going to be using this to go around the miniature and find all of those tufts of fur that are protruding from clothing and helmets and stuff like that. So just take your time, block them in, be careful around anything that's, you know, already skin colour and purple. Anything else doesn't really matter, we can tidy it up later.
This banner is
Moving on to Leadbelcher, and we're going to use this to base coat all of the areas that we want to be metallic. That includes his gauntlets, any piping that we want to be metallic, the little chair backpack that carries that little rat control person on the back, any armour plates, all of that stuff is going to be Leadbelcher, and by the time you're finished you'll have something that looks like this. The next stage is the Rakarth flesh, and as bad as I am at framing this particular shot on this model for some reason, we're going to use it to touch in the cloth cover on the top of the big sort of backpacky thing that he has on his back. Fuel tanks, I guess, who knows. And we're also going to touch in any little cloth areas that they have, which on this particular model that you can barely see is a little cloth wrap on his tail. Now once that's done, we're going to grab our Mephiston red and we're going to go over the lower half armour details on the gauntlets, so just the bottom half of the armour plate, you'll see what I mean here, and once that's all done you'll have something that looks a bit like this. Next step, really quick one, grab your Flesh Tearers red and just go over all of the pipe work that goes from the gauntlets to the backpack. This will take you no time at all. Then grab some Screamer Pink and touch in the brain on the little rat operative on his back. Straight on with the Runelord brass, I'm going to use this to touch in any iconography, his little fist cauldrons, on this particular model the little balls of ammunition that are coming out of his gauntlet, and then the fuel tanky things on his backpack. So once the Retributor armour is all done, we're on to our final stage before basing. Surprise, the basing is going to be exactly the same as all the other models, but for this stage we're going to be washing it in Agrax Earthshade. So get a good amount on your brush, make sure you're working it into all the cracks and crevices and all of the recessed details. You're just looking to make sure it doesn't pool in any one particular area. If it does, just use your brush to move it around. Then once it's all finished and done and complete, you've added your base. This is what the finished article looks like. Moving on to our Plague Monks now, and the first paint we're going to need is Plaugebearers Flesh, which is a contrast paint. Now, with it being a contrast paint, it's going to be a lot more fluid than any other paints that we might have used so far, so don't load loads onto your brush. Work it into all the areas. Once you start painting an area, just keep painting that area, make sure there's no pooling, no tide marks, and just cover the entire miniature. Let it dry thoroughly before moving on to the next step. The next step is our rat skin of choice, Bugmans Glow, and we're going to go around the miniature and pick out all of the skin areas so we can get it ready for the next stage. Next, you'll want to grab your Gorthor Brown. We're going to paint in all of the staffs that these guys are holding, and if they happen to have any protruding hair tufts, which I don't think I encountered any actually on my Plague Monks, just touch them in anyway. Grab your Rakarth flesh. We're going to use this in the same manner that we've used it before for all the claws and teeth, etc. But we're also going to touch in all the skulls and the parchments on the staves. Two metallic paints left before the wash stage. So the first one is Leadbelcher, and we're going to cover all of the weapon, the top and bottom sort of metal studs on the stave. And then we're going to move on to our Castelax bronze, and we're just going to use this on any models that had sort of anything kind of fancy. I think this is a standard bearer here, so we're just going to cover his standard in gold, let that completely dry, move on to the wash shade of Agrax Earthshade. You know the drill by now, we're just going to give the model a thin cover of Agrax Earthshade, making sure it's not pooling anywhere. We're even going to cover over all the contrast paint, and once that's done, dried, we've based and varnished our models, you're going to be left with an army of miniatures that looks something like this. So look, full disclosure, I didn't get everything painted today. The siege engines and the characters are still missing, unfortunately, but still I think 73 models is pretty good going for a speed painting day, and actually the quality of these I'm pretty okay with. They're, you know, not going to win any painting awards, but I think they look really good on the table, and they kind of give that imposing nature, and they're all kind of uniform as well, which is nice. So look, this is the part of the video where I thank you, the people watching it, if you've got this far. If you've watched this far, that's great. It does wonders for the channel. The other thing that does great things for the channel is for you to like, comment, share, subscribe. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care. Bye.